Okay, excellent. So my name's Asha Sahni and I'm based at the University of Bristol, and I have with me Andrew and Patience, who are one of the mentoring pairs in our first ever pilot of reciprocal mentoring. Now, reciprocal mentoring is different from your standard mentoring in that what you're really doing is turning things in reverse. So whereas normally what you do is you'd have somebody who's very senior, perhaps being a mentor, what we're doing in this case is we're turning things around so that the mentor is the person who's in a more junior position. And the reason for doing this is to help people understand different perspectives. So it may be that if you're a leader and you've actually progressed very well in your career, there may be a lot about different experiences of people, say, from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic community that you don't know. So what we did in Bristol was we actually matched 14 BAME mentors with 14 members of the University Executive Board. And what we did was have an information session, do some training, have some midway reviews and have final sessions for mentoring. So we actually provided quite a lot of input, more than you get in some standard programs. And that was partly because the Black and minority ethnic staff were doing something that was actually quite challenging. It was challenging on both sides, as you'll find when we ask some questions of Andrew and Patience, because both sides of the mentoring relationship were being asked to do something that was new, whereas sometimes you might have a clear roadmap. Here there was less of a roadmap.
Sorry to interrupt, Asha. I don't know if you were still wanting to share slides, but your slides have disappeared. So
oh, have they? Right,
yeah,
let me try again.
If you're able to share your screen.
Yeah, no, that's very weird. I don't know why that's happened. Right, is that working?
Yes.
You could see them. Fine.
Yes,
I don't know why that happened. So yeah, so basically less of a roadmap. So what we wanted to do with this pilot was make sure that we did something that was supportive and gave people on both sides enough information and support to be able to take the scheme forward. So why reciprocal mentoring? A term earlier that was used, structured mentoring, can be very different to reciprocal. So in structured mentoring, the mentor is in a senior position. With reciprocal, the mentee is in a senior position. Normally in mentoring, the mentee expects to learn from the mentor, but with reciprocal, it's more about the mentee and mentor learning from each other. In traditional mentoring, the mentor may be more likely to have the answers. In reciprocal mentoring, the mentor and mentee often work out questions and answers together. And in structured mentoring, the destination is clearly defined. Whereas in reciprocal mentoring, the destination may be undefined, and it may be that it's discovered more along the way. In structured mentoring, the mentor leads, the mentee follows. Whereas in reciprocal mentoring, what's more likely to happen is that the learning happens jointly and people progress along the path together. That's interesting. I'm having trouble going down on my slides. Let me just see. Okay. There's something slightly weird going on with my slides, so I'll just talk to the next one. I don't have that many slides anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to stop presenting and just have it so that I can talk. Okay.
Thanks, Asha. We're totally glued to what you're saying, so
it
should be.
Thank you. So the other thing I wanted to bring up before bringing Andrew and Patience in, who are really the stars of the show here because they've done so much and come so far with this, is to just say a bit about the things we thought about in setting up this mentoring scheme. So we started it in lockdown. So we didn't have any choice. We had to do training. We had to do a lot of stuff online. But what we have found is that if people meet face to face, at least for their first meeting, it helps create a really good relationship that can make the mentoring happen better. we were looking at thinking outside of the box, outside of traditional mentoring relationships, about people looking together about how they might build a contract with each other, where they both learn from each other and both gain value. We were thinking about dynamics, and those dynamics being equal, so avoiding spaces which create power dynamics. So it would be very easier for the mentee, as the senior person, to have the mentor in their office. You've immediately got a power dynamic there, which might actually prove difficult. And also communication. So asking people to be direct with communication whilst being clear about boundaries, and being willing to ask things that they might normally ask of somebody, and be willing to look at what they would say or how they would deal with things if somebody went over a boundary that they weren't prepared to tread. So from that, I'd like to move on to asking Andrew and Patience to talk a bit about their experience. And what I'll do, if that's okay with you guys, is start with Patience each time and then move on to Andrew. Does that work? So the first question.
For me, absolutely.
Well, yeah, as Patience well knows, Andrew's very good at talking. So we'll aim to keep this to time as much as possible.
No, that sounds perfect, and I'll ask Sam to help beam forward whoever is speaking at the time.
That's wonderful, Sam, thank you. So the first question, Patience, is why did you join the Reciprocal Mentoring scheme? And what did you hope to gain from the partnership?
Okay, thank you very much, Asha. So I joined the Reciprocal Mentoring. As I always say, at the beginning I was a bit skeptical, but the reason I joined was to have an opportunity to speak or to have a relationship with somebody from a senior position within the organization. I always felt that there was a lot of positive rhetoric from the SMT, but I didn't think it translated very well to the, to the ordinary, professional services member of staff. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to hear what, happens at the top, and also maybe to feedback what happens on the ground to somebody in a more senior position. I think another reason was I had a lot of experience as a Black woman within an organization, went through a few experiences, and I got to the point where I felt, does anybody really realize what goes on? Or, so it was a good opportunity for me maybe to share my experiences, hear what happens at the top. Do they really take this thing seriously? So this was the main reason why I joined the mentoring program. Thank you.
Thank you, Patience. And Andrew, from your side, why did you join and what do you hope to gain? Andrew, you're on mute.
I'm unmuted now, hopefully. Fingers crossed. What I wanted to do was step outside of my own echo chamber. And so you are surrounded by views and colleagues, and there is a diverse community within that to an extent. But you hear one very particular perspective on day-to-day life, on the role of the university. And for me, this was an opportunity to, albeit hear from one lived experience, but from somebody who was outside of my normal echo chamber, who could give me a very honest view of what it is like to work within the organisation, but help me to understand as well and to develop my own empathy for what that lived experience looks like within the organisation, but within day-to-day life as well. So for me, it was about personal growth and actually moving beyond my comfort zone. So moving into topics, to areas which I was passionate and I cared very much about, but I recognised that I understood very little. So actually it was just basically too good an opportunity to miss.
Thank you, Andrew, and very succinct. Moving on, Patience, what skills did you gain during the course of your mentoring partnership?
So I think there were some skills that were perfected, and there were some skills that were brought more to light as we went in with the program. So the first thing was that Andrew was very good at sort of highlighting things that I really didn't see. So take, for example, I would be like, oh, I've applied for jobs, but I don't, like I haven't really gone anywhere. I'm just stuck in one position. And then he would highlight things that if you've worked here and there, there's definitely skills that you can bring when you apply. There's ways that you can bring your skills up. You can mention them, talk about things. So it really made me realize that sometimes, even in job applications, there were things that I didn't say, but actually I could have said, and that could have helped my application. So I really, that was, and it worked to my advantage, because I would have you know that during the time of the mentoring, Andrew was very helpful. I applied to be a trustee for an organization, emailed Andrew, and he was off, but he replied, and tips and pointers, and I managed to get that position. And it, my confidence just grew, and he was very, very supportive, and just made me realize that sometimes I look down on myself when you've been through a lot, and you think, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Maybe these people are right in, like turning me down all the time. But he was very, very, very supportive, bringing out the best in me, and a lot of skills that were in there already were just brought to the fore. So yeah, definitely a lot of skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Patience. And Andrew, skills you developed, that matured?
I think so. The first, despite what you said, Asha, so rudely about my love of talking, which is very true. I'm trying to be very considered. So rude. Is listening, actually. The honesty and openness and trust that Patience brought to that working relationship between us, to that mentoring relationship between us. It taught me about making assumptions. It taught me about projecting. It taught me about making sweeping generalizations in my own head as well. And so I learned a lot about actually listening and thinking about the individual. I would say almost, so that's the skill side, but it was the knowledge development. It was the understanding. It's so rare to actually have that opportunity to, we talk about walking in somebody else's shoes, and I can't begin to ever experience life as Patience has experienced it. But that level of openness, that level of conversation, the fact that no topic was off bounds, and our conversations ranged widely as well, really gave me an understanding of that lived experience of what it is to be a Black woman working in the university, to be a Black woman working in the UK, living in the UK, raising a family in the UK. And I think that it was that level of empathy and understanding is my major takeaway from the programme.
Thank you, Andrew. You actually touched on one of the words that I used as the title for the talk, which was empathy, which is something which seems to have come up again and again when talking to people about this process. So my last question, Patience, is what advice would you give anyone thinking of joining a reciprocal mentoring programme?
I would say go for it. I was, like I said, I was very skeptical, but I gained, what I came out with was much more than I bargained for, much more than I expected, because I was very, again, like having experienced things, from different individuals. You sort of label people with the same brush, like all senior managers, they don't really care, they don't, but after this experience, I actually realized that there are people within the organization who genuinely care and who genuinely want to make a difference, who genuinely want things to change for the better. And I'm really glad I went for it, because I had come to the place where I said, I'm just giving up on this. I'm not going to pursue this, equality stuff. It's just all talk, and it never happens. But then I'm glad that, having been on the reciprocal mentoring, it actually changed the way I look at things and my understanding. It also opened up a door that I didn't really I was seeing things from a different perspective, but I genuinely believe there are people within the organization who are trying their level best to make things better. And it has made me more positive, whereas before I was like, oh, just dejected, just giving up on, this equality agenda. But then it made me more positive. It made me look forward to, okay, even though nothing is showing at the moment, there are things that are happening, and it doesn't take, it takes a while, it doesn't happen overnight. And just to be positive and just to, like, go for things, go for opportunities. So I would definitely recommend anybody to really go for it.
Thank you, Patience. And Andrew, what would you recommend?
So firstly, I would recommend to anybody to immediately sign up and take part, because it's transformational. And hopefully, as you've heard from Patience and I, for all parties involved, for me as the mentee as well, and Patience. I know that this is a mixed audience on this call, but I think, speaking as somebody who, so I sit on the university executive board, I'm part of the senior leadership team at the university, and it's very easy for people to assume that we have the answers, we have the knowledge, we know what we're doing. Frighteningly, it's often not the case that we know what we're doing, and we're trying to find our way as well. And I think it was that humanizing element, so that ability as a senior leader to take part, because it connects you so much more to the organization. You're looking at policies, you're looking at initiatives that are sort of pan-institutional. Now, actually hearing about how that plays out in an individual's life, that is so much more powerful, and being able to connect. And I've talked to Patients before of I sit in university meetings, and I now sit there and think, what would Patients say? How would Patients feel about that? And it's one lens, but it's an additional lens to mine that I'm looking at these different issues through, and I think that's incredibly powerful. I think overall, if you're going to approach reciprocal mentoring, and as I say, I would urge you to do so, you need to do so with an open heart and open mind. I think the way in which we were able to build the relationship early on, and build that trust, and agree the parameters, and agree the fact that we were really comfortable with a very open relationship as well, in terms of honesty and trust about the things that we would discuss. But importantly as well, we also did have a framework. We did set ourselves objectives at the outset to discuss what we were both going to achieve at the end of it, and we largely tried to hold ourselves to account to make sure that as we move forward that we were progressing towards those goals. And when you look at the end, you look back at what we set out to achieve, and I think for both of us, we really achieved an awful lot of what we could do. And some of that was learning that actually the things that I was looking to achieve at the outset were not realistic, and actually I needed to reframe that. But that was an important lesson in its own right. But there was a wonderful balance between unstructured discussion as well as with a clear direction of travel as well. And I think that's a piece of advice that I would share.
Thank you, Andrew. And that's, again, a really useful point about goals, that if you do look at goals, they can change as you go along, but it's always worth revisiting what you think you're doing during a relationship, checking if you're still on track and checking if things need to change.